evening, I'm Amber Frias and welcome to Impeachment Wrap. Where does America stand? Our web-only live show that wraps up everything you need to know about today's Senate impeachment trial. After days of wondering whether or not witness testimony would be a part of the Senate impeachment trial, we finally have an answer. The next phase of the process will continue without it. And even if the administrative work of the Senate, including motions and debates, extends into next week, it's expected that President Trump will be acquitted at the end of the process. Karen Kaifa has the latest from Washington.
The motion is not agreed to.
As anticipated, by a 51-49 margin, the Senate votes against hearing from witnesses and obtaining documents in the impeachment trial of President Trump. Closing arguments are now expected to start Monday, with a vote to acquit the president on Wednesday.
Mr. Romney, aye.
Senator Susan Collins of Maine and Mitt Romney of Utah, the only two Republicans to vote in favor of hearing from witnesses, including former National Security Advisor John Bolton.
I've said for some time that I hope to be able to hear from John Bolton.
But Senate Republicans had the slim majority they needed to vote down the measure and are now prepared to acquit President Trump.
It is not our job to expand the House's investigation.
Before the vote, House managers making their last pitch.
Let's put John Bolton under oath. Let's find out who's telling the truth.
And the president's defense team opposing.
The Senate is not here to do the investigatory work that the House didn't do.
Democratic leader Chuck Schumer calling Friday's vote a tragedy.
America will remember this day, unfortunately, where the Senate did not live up to its responsibilities, where the Senate turned away from truth and went along with a sham trial.
That was Karen Kaifa reporting. Republican leaders have long held that obtaining witness testimony is a House duty. Joe Khalil caught up with more House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy this morning before the vote to talk about this perspective.
Well, I don't think it's the role of the Senate.
House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy says it's the job of the House, not the Senate, to do a complete investigation. That means calling all relevant witnesses and taking them to court to force subpoenas if necessary.
Send it to the Senate, and they're supposed to be the jury and judge. You don't get to call others up.
The president's lawyers were invited to take part in the House impeachment process, but declined. Now, despite that, McCarthy says the president never got his due process.
And there's this legal term, the fruit of the poison tree. So if you start with poison at the very beginning, it doesn't work.
In Washington, I'm Joe Khalil.
Democratic leaders, meanwhile, calling this decision an insult to the process.
Lamar's decision, it's an offense against the Senate, it's an offense against the rule of law, and it's an offense against the American people. The American people will never know the true facts. The Senate will now have the first ever so-called trial that is a kangaroo court without witnesses and without documents, and it's certainly an insult to the rule of law. So it's a tragedy in every possible way that this is where we're headed.
They've been trying to rush this thing through. At first, they proposed that we would have 2 days, and then their constituents said, well, that's ridiculous, and so they extended it to 3 as though they were being very gracious. But they've always been focused on their end game, our Republican senators. And the end game for them has been acquittal. But here's the deal. You cannot have a true acquittal if you've not had a fair trial. So they are not going to get what they've been trying to get if they do not allow witnesses to come forward. This is not a fair trial. The American people, the vast majority of the American public, want this United States Senate to produce the new evidence. The only place this is being debated between Republicans and Democrats is not among the American people, it's here in the United States Senate. The American people, Republicans and Democrats, the vast majority, believe that the new evidence should come forward.
The president himself took to Twitter this afternoon to express his thoughts on the trial. Around 1 p.m. our time, about an hour and a half before the Senate vote, he wrote, quote, "The radical left do nothing. Democrats keep chanting fairness when they put on the most unfair witch hunt in the history of the U.S. Congress. They had 17 witnesses. We were allowed 0 and no lawyers. They didn't do their job, had no case. The Dems are scamming America." And within the same hour of the final vote, the president tweeted, Democrats 17 witnesses, Republicans 0 witnesses. An hour later, no matter what you give to the Democrats in the end, they will never be satisfied. In the House, they gave us nothing. One Republican senator shared his thoughts today on how the president has chosen to express himself online during this time.
What should the president do?
talk more about what you've accomplished, stay laser focused, and if you're going to tweet, which is okay, defend yourself, which is okay, turn it down a notch.
Meantime, another top Senate department official in the middle of the impeachment trial is stepping down. NPR first reported that former Ambassador Marie Jovanovic is retiring after 30 years of service. Her decision happened sometime in the past 2 weeks. She says she was devastated to hear how the president spoke about her when she served in Ukraine. The White House recalled Jovanovic from that post in May 2019. According to a New York Times report out Friday, that could be the same month President Trump asked John Bolton to help him pressure Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. The Times cites a draft of the former National Security Advisor's upcoming book. Jovanovic isn't the only person involved in the impeachment trial who's getting out of the State Department. The others include one-time U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Bill Taylor, former Special Representative for Ukraine Kurt Volker, and former Senior Advisor to Secretary Pompeo Michael McKinley.